You are listening to Missed Apex Podcast. We love MotoGP. Hello and welcome to Missed Apex MotoGP Podcast. This is a show put together by MotoGP fans pretending to be experts. We aim to have a race review show ready for your midweek commute. We may just be punters, but we love to talk. Round 1 of 2025 is only a few days away, and so for the first time this year, we can say it's race week. Let's have a bit of wild speculation, some predictions and wishes ahead of the season opener. As ever, I'm your host Kyle Power, and today I'm joined in the virtual shed by our very own tyre-obsessed trumpeter, Matt Trumpets. How's it going, Matt?
Is fantastic. I'm looking forward to our vibes-based podcast immensely.
Absolutely, and it is vibe space, and this is going to be just some pure wild speculation, and that's all about. But there is a bit of news. Just before recording this show, we've just found out that Jorge Martin has somehow managed to have a training accident at home and broken his other hand. So he's definitely out of round 1 now in a training accident. I mean, Matt, how's your luck? I can't believe it.
Well, you know, the thing with luck is it tends to be streaky. So I guess if there is a silver lining, it's like, well, maybe I'll just break all of the things right now and be healthy for the rest of the season. You might take that. But I'm gobsmacked really as to how this happened, and especially missing the first round. I think from a points position, it's not so bad, but he's supposed to be leading the team to new levels, and he's not touched the bike yet. So I'm worried more about the longer term, the delayed effects of not having any feedback on the bike until round 2 going forwards. Reminds me a lot of what we saw with Ducati at the beginning of last season, where they had the bike they thought could win, but it took them a long time to engineer it into being friendly. Yeah, absolutely. And as you said, he had the post-season Barcelona test to get to grips with it, but then he only had 12 laps of this season, and the bike has moved quite a lot. Bezzecchi's been doing all of the development, so the bike would have changed quite a lot. And yeah, you're right, this is going to massively delay his adaptation. I don't think anybody was realistically touting him to win or defend his title this year on the Aprilia. That would have been a big ask, but this is the worst possible start for him. And, you know, a fast Jorge up the front is what we want for the action. We all wish Jorge a speedy recovery, and hopefully we'll see him in Argentina for round 2. He's got a couple of weeks to sort himself out. I believe he's having some more surgery, so he's going to come back with 2 plated hands and a bit of a sore foot, and hopefully he'll be all right. So that was a bit of a damp start to the season for him. But let's get on to some wild speculation and predictions. So, as you probably noted, there's only 2 of us on this show, as unfortunately life has got in the way a little bit and we couldn't be joined by the rest of our panel, but they have sent in some of their predictions and we'll go through them and their wishes in a bit. But first, we're the best ones. Let's do ours first then. Matt, who's going to win the championship? Oh, you know, honestly, if I'm looking at it, if you look at the evidence, if you look at the data, right now, if you bet on anyone other than Marquez, you just, it's like, I don't see how
Marquez?
You just, Mark, of course, on the factory Ducati. He's had the best preseason. He was remarkably competitive on the 23 bike last season. And Pecco has basically said, yeah, you know, I'm looking at his data to figure out where I need to find time. So the early advantage has to be his. I think the fly in anyone's ointment is always going to be a question with Marquez, and that's going to be injury. You know, he has a propensity for getting injured. That could run the wrong way for him, and he does struggle with the right hand turns or the left hand turns.
That's right hand turns, yeah.
Yeah, I've not gone through and looked at the circuits and seen, you know, where Pecco might have a little bit of an advantage because he hasn't, you know, broken that side of his body as much as Mark has. But I would secretly love for Aprilia or some of the other Ducati bikes to just get in the way and make it impossible to predict until the very last races.
Yeah, that would be ideal scenario. So before going on to the next question of what you would like to see happen, you kind of touched on there. I'll do mine, who I think is going to win the championship.
And Bezecchi, of course.
Yeah, it's Bezecchi. I was going to say, unfortunately, I'm going to have to agree with Matt. I think Mark is going to. I think this could potentially be utter annihilation of the championship for Mark. Like I said, we saw what Mark was doing in that GP23, which was significantly behind the 24s last year. Gigi Delaney said so himself, hence they panicked to get Mark on the factory team and not lose him elsewhere when he made his power play. And this is going to come in some of our predictions from our panel later on, because there's particularly Adam and Jules are predicting something here, and you've touched on it as well. And I'm actually going to borrow a brilliant phrase that I've heard several times used by Neil Hodgson on TNT Sport. And I think it's very true. And I think the only person who can potentially beat Marc Marquez next year, or this season even, is Marc Marquez. If he does do something silly and has a crash and injures himself and puts himself out for a few rounds, realistically, I think that's Pecco Bagnaia's best hope of the title. Yes, I might be a bit of a Marquez fanboy, but as you said, the data and everything at the moment, Pecco's had a rough pre-season. He's starting on the back foot. Mark was really quick on that GP23. Now he's got equal machinery. I don't think anyone's got a hope in getting anywhere near him, but let's hope it is a tough championship. So what would you really love to see happen, Matt? What would you really like happening?
I would really, like I said, first of all, coming to it last season, it was hard not to become a Jorge Martin fan. I liked the way he was so spectacular on that bike. So I would love for the Bagnaia Marquez battle to progress in such a way that he was legitimately, at least, could claim to be fighting for it, even if the bike wasn't fully up to the job yet. But the other person I really liked, and this I would love so much, is Acosta on the KTM factory bike. He was so good on the satellite bike. And he rode that bike, and Bender was just like, everyone was like, where are you finding these seconds on the track? Yeah. Wouldn't it be the best if he just like sneakily wormed his way up there and suddenly everyone was like, he's in with a shout? I would kind of love to see that. So my two, what would you call them, low salience predictions are, one, that somehow Martin or Bezecchi gets back in it for Aprilia, but especially Acosta somehow with the factory bike is just suddenly there in a way that he wasn't quite last season on the satellite bike.
That's awesome prediction. That's very similar to me. Like I would love to see that happen. I'm not going to argue with that at all. What I would love to see happen is Aprilia nicking some wins. I'd love to see them in a title fight. I just think that's a bit too much of a hard push, but I'd really love to see Quartararo up there pinching some wins, getting some podiums, and I'd love to see some Honda getting some podiums. I just want their manufacturers up fighting regularly for top fives again, and maybe if the circuit suits them or is conducive to their bike being good, that they will nab some points and some podiums. I think it would be great for the sport to have Honda and Yamaha back to the front again. And to follow on the Acosta thing, yes, he had a factory bike last year, but not the factory team. It was the satellite bike, and he didn't have all that data and engineers available to him. Now he has all the data and engineers, and he can actually control the direction and development of the bike more to his style. He seemed to get on with the quirk of it, Matt, better than anyone else, but now he can tweak that more to his own liking.
Yeah, and the thing is, the engineers will also have access to the Acosta, who took a bike that they thought was at a particular lap time, and then he just rang the bell and was suddenly set. And I've heard this from engineers, like they will sit down and they'll calculate all the parameters. It's harder in MotoGP, but they'll calculate everything and they'll have a predicted lap time, and a driver will get in and will be faster, and they'll be like, oh, well, we didn't consider they might do that. And I feel like Acosta is kind of that rider on the KTM. He came to it with no preconceptions and just wrung the neck of the thing. And maybe once the engineers have access to him as a feedback mechanism, they might actually be able to engineer it and to be being genuinely much more competitive with the Ducati than we saw last season.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we've seen, particularly Bastianini mention and Maverick Vinales as well, that the quirk of the KTM is the braking, and it's really weird on the braking. And Acosta seemed to be able to exploit that, maybe because he was coming in as a blank sheet and wasn't used to any other braking, so that's all he knows, and he can really exploit that. So it'd be super interesting to see them going down that direction. And we've got the 4 KTMs now, all pretty much in identical liveries. So you've got the satellite bikes, but they're all going to be factory bikes. So it's going to be interesting to see where that goes. So that's our predictions mainly done and out of the way. So we've got our panel to send some in, and some of these are quite interesting. So we can debate over their predictions. And we'll start off with Danny Henney, our token Northerner, and Danny has said that he reckons it's going to be a Marc Marquez championship domination, which I'm not going to argue with at all. I think it's pretty much what I'm predicting, but he's made a really bold one here, and I think it's quite good. He reckons it's going to be a third place championship battle between Alex Marquez and Digi, because no one's going to touch the GP24. So he thinks Alex Marquez and Di Giannantonio are going to be fighting out for the third. Now that's a bold prediction, I think. I'm not sure I agree with that.
Yeah, my favorite thing is to debate people who aren't here, because it's so easy to just say that they're wrong. They can't argue. I understand where he's coming from. He's coming from the bike is the best bike, therefore the riders with that bike will have the biggest advantage. It's hard to argue with, but the thing about bikes though is the riders have to have the consistency to match. And they have to have the head to manage. Like, it's one thing. I could absolutely see both of those riders having a win on that bike.
Absolutely.
I don't, especially on a track that favors them or that they particularly enjoy. But you ask yourself the consistency across a whole season, sprint and Grand Prix. I don't know. It's a tall ask. You're saying that the 24 is so much. I mean, and don't forget, we saw Vinales went on Aprilia last season at Coda, right? And they've made improvements. And Bezzecchi, I would argue, has probably got a better record than Vinales at this point. If you're talking about bringing a bike home and having the talent, especially after what we heard of the preseason. So I don't know. I like Danny. He makes some very well considered points, but I'm not sure I fully agree with this one.
That's cool. You make a really good point with Bezzecchi there, because I think out of anybody everybody who's changed manufacturers, he's the happiest by a long way. He's had a very good pre-season. Digi, I actually think that's not a bad shout. Digi's really good last year. He's coming into this season injured again because he had his failed wheelie landing, broke his collarbone. He's just got over his shoulder injury. He missed the back end of last season. But yeah, Digi I think will be more consistent than Alex Marquez. Alex Marquez, who has also had an amazing preseason, arguably the strongest rider cumulatively over the preseason. I still think he is going to crash more. He still thinks he's going to crash more. But yeah, we'll move on for that. That's a good claim from Danny. He's going to say Aprilia is best of the rest. Well, I don't think that's any surprise. Yamaha to beat KTM. That's an interesting one. So Yamaha really turned it round. I think KTM are going to take a bit of beating with Acosta in that midfield fight. And Zarco as top Honda, which I actually think is a solid shout. I thoroughly agree with that, because Zarco last year, I mean, Johan Mir spent more time in his arse than he did on the bike. Marini was still getting his head around it. Zarco top Honda, surely that's a good shout.
I think it is. I love the idea of, like, literally my impression of Honda last season was like, okay, well, we made it 3 laps. Okay, well, we made it 5 laps. Hey, we made it almost a half race distance before everybody crashed out. It was just like, because they're there just trying to keep up with everyone until the bike just chucks them off. And I don't know. I want to go back. The thing that he said that I think is really interesting is the Yamaha to beat KTM. Now, if you're talking in terms of teams, this is 4 KTM bikes. How many Yamahas? 4 also?
4. Yeah, because
all right. So if we're talking about points for points, I might not disagree with that. But I love the idea of Quartararo and Acosta.
Yeah.
Like, who's going to finish ahead there? That to me is interesting a question. And the thing I think Yamaha has on their side is momentum. They made big strides last season. They have the concessions where KTM does not, correct?
Yep, no, that is exactly right. And that's a very, very good point.
And so I could totally see the teams thing being true. But I'm not sure I see Quartararo beating Acosta because still the KTM was a decent bike in his hands.
It was inconsistent though as well, but as was the Yamaha. So actually, Danny's started a fascinating side pot here. Let's track this throughout the season because that's going to be a good little sort of a MotoGP 2.5 battle going on behind the Ducatis. That's really, really good. Not much to say on Zarco Top Honda, I reckon. So yeah, nice one for sending them in, Danny. Let's move on to Adam Rosales now. I reckon our smooth talking Texan. So Adam has taken a completely different approach to this, and he reckons that Pecco's going to win the championship, which is a bold claim. We know he's a Pecco fan. He also reckons Mark's going to get hurt at some point and miss a race or two. And his final point is Yamaha gets its groove back, podium contenders, that's bold. That's a bold claim. I'd love for that to happen, but I don't think it will. But let's start at the top. Pecco wins the championship. And now, I don't know whether he's put this in Mark gets hurt at some point and misses a race as a hope or a prediction. No, I'm joking. Of course, that's a prediction and not a hope. I think Pecco will win the championship if Mark gets hurt. I don't think he'll win a championship without Mark getting hurt.
It comes down to, I think, yes, he has to stay healthy. And that is always a concern with him at this point. But it's also, and we saw him do this last season where he was competitive and then he's pushing and throws it away.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Pecco right behind you, pushing you into mistakes is the strategy that you have to watch out for. If he starts to lay the bike down in the sprints and starts to lose those points to Pecco, who may not be faster, well, then anything is possible. But yeah, again, if you look at it right now, it's going to be like, oh, he gets injured and he misses 3 races. Recovery, that kind of injury. Because I think a single weekend won't be enough to sway it based on what we've seen so far. Although admittedly, that's very poor from a data point of view. We don't have, in is very small right now.
Yeah, exactly. We haven't seen an awful lot at all. And am I probably doing a disservice to Pecco? He's a double champion in his own right. We might see him raised to new levels this year. He's never faced a challenge like this, and this is what's making me salivate over the season. It's the Mark versus Pecco fight, and Pecco is a gentleman. We've seen him be very gentleman, but he is a tough racer, and he is very, very and he isn't afraid to get his elbows out as well. So I'm really looking forward to them two fighting hard. I'd love Yamaha to get back into groove. I'd love them to be podium contenders. I'm not entirely sure if they could be regular podium contenders, but I think Quartararo will be nabbing some podiums, and I'm going to put it out here, a very bold prediction that I'm going to put out here. I think Marc Marquez is going to be leading at Cota, massively leading, lose concentration, have a silly front end tuck and drop it, and Alex Rins on the Yamaha is going to sneak through and take a shock win for Yamaha at Cota, because Alex Rins is a Cota specialist. I think Yamaha will hopefully go well there, lacking power. That is my crazy, outwardly crazy prediction.
You're not betting on red and black anymore, my friend. You're betting on numbers. Are you sure you want to do this?
Yeah. Yep. I'm absolutely, yeah, I'm going specific. I'll tell you what, if this doesn't happen, I'll let you buy me a pint. That's the deal.
I probably owe you a few anyway.
All good. Okay, so nice one for sending them through, Adam. That's cool. And now, well, we can say we've saved the best till last. Now, those regular listeners of the show knows that Jules has a penchant for a detailed and lengthy answer to questions, and he hasn't let us down in his predictions he's sent through. Unfortunately, Jules is doing his community pillar of the community and coaching a kids football team, so he could not be here tonight, but he has sent us through an essay of points, and we will address all of the points because some of them are brilliant. So his first point is sent through. He reckons Marc Marquez is not going to win the opening race because he's only done that once in MotoGP, and that was 2014, and it was in Qatar. Of course, the opening round this coming weekend is in Buriram in Thailand. And Martin Quick, that's a pretty bold claim, saying he's not going to win the opening race because he's been looking fastest over the race distance. I wonder who will win instead. Alex Marquez. What do you reckon, Matt? I reckon if Mark doesn't win, I think Alex Marquez might win it. Or actually, no, I'm going to change that. Bagnaia. Bagnaia will build throughout the weekend and deliver on Sunday, as he did so many times last year.
Again, if you're talking the odds, well, yeah, Bagnaia would be the person. But I'm trying to think back to who had a particularly good race in Thailand last season. And that's...
Well, it was near the end of the round, wasn't it? And I think the sprint was dry, but the actual MotoGP was wet.
Right.
I think the MotoGP was wet. Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. I think Bagnaia was really, really strong, like super, super strong.
Yeah. So that's a good shout by Jules to go there. And especially if it's but didn't we have testing there? And it didn't work out like that. So.
Yeah, exactly. Pecco was really struggling loads, but he was really struggling during the race weekend, I remember last year, and was struggling in the wet, and he pulled such a performance out of the bag. So that's very possible. So his next point, Jules reckons the rookie of the season is going to be Firmin Aldeguer on the 24 Ducati. Well, I don't think that's too much of a surprise. Firmin was really quick in Malaysia, struggled a little bit more in Thailand, but I reckon he'll probably be the rookie of the season overall. He has that 24 Ducati. His closest rival, I think, would be Iagora on the Aprilia, but the 24 Ducati versus the Aprilia over the season, you'll have to say the 24 Ducati is going to win out there.
Well, see, here you've got me at a disadvantage because I didn't watch a lot of the other classes, the Moto 2 and Moto 3. But I would argue right now, I would pick the rider that was most consistent and not fastest for rookie, because as we saw, you throw away an awful lot of points if you tuck the front in the sprints, and especially on the Sunday. So maybe being on the not fastest bike is an advantage because you're riding to take advantage of other people falling off and not pushing to the absolute limit yourself. So I think whoever has the head for the consistency will be the winner of those two rookies. And I honestly don't know which one of them I think it is because I didn't see enough of their performances to make a judgment.
Yeah. I think the rookies on the slower bike will be riding like lunatics, trying to make up for a slower bike and throwing it down the road a lot, which is what rookies are supposed to do. It'd be rude not to. It'd be rude not to go in there like an absolute nutter and go crazy, which I'm pretty sure they will do. So we'll move on to the next point is made, which is most forgettable rider move of the season, and he's saying Miguel Oliveira to Pramac. Miguel Oliveira. Well, I pronounced it correctly for the Portuguese.
That was a
Oliveira,
joke. That was a joke.
Right,
people.
I know. You tried to do it funny. He has been stealth Miguel the last few years. Like, this is a multiple Grand Prix winner. He was amazing on the KTM, Miguel Oliveira, and he had a rough time on the Aprilia. He was harpooned by Marc Marquez a couple of seasons ago, and I don't think he's fully recovered from that at the start. But I think that's a good shout from Jules. He was a bit anonymous in testing. He's a great rider. I'd love him to be really, really good, but I think he was comfortably outpaced by Jack Miller, who adapted really well to the Yamaha as well. So most forgettable rider move of the season, Miguel Oliveira. I think that's a good shout, Jules. I'll give you that one. Dark horses. He's come out and reckoned the dark horse season will be Bez will get a podium. So Marco Bezzecchi will get a podium before Jorge Martin, and Alex Marquez will win a race. I think they're both really, really good shouts. He also says that Frankie Morbidelli will silence his critics. Now, let's unpack that a little bit. I think the Bez will get a podium before Jorge Martin. Very, very good possibility. I think Martin's going to be struggling with injuries and adapting, and Bez has that bike pretty much where he wants it already. Surely that's almost a given.
Yeah, I mean I think that comes with a time limit on it. And the time limit is defined by the point you most eloquently make, which is how long will it take Martin to catch up to the bike and begin to get it into the neighborhood where he feels confident on it. And also just frankly, fitness. Because, I mean, you know, you can do, there's an amount of fitness you can do with broken hands, but it's not race fitness, if you know what I mean. We used to have a saying, you know, you train to race, but at a certain point you race to train. And he's not been on the bike, and everybody else has been on the bike, and they've been on the bike, and they've been on the mini bikes, and they've been on the motocross bikes, and he's been stuck at home with his hands unable to operate throttles and brakes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it's going to be catch up time for him. Once he catches up, I think I would still favor him a little bit over Bezzecchi. But if the doors open early on, if there's a wet race, or you know, or if who could imagine like Marquez and Bagnaia taking each other out?
Surely that won't happen.
Surely that will never happen.
We're all hoping it happens at some point. We want to see the drama.
It would be so juicy. But yeah, no, I think early season Bezzecchi is definitely a favorite for a podium if the circumstances favor it.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. It's bold saying Alex Marquez will win a race. I'm not an anti-Alex Marquez fan. I just think he crashes too much, but he has been looking really good, so that's a good thing. Jules gone to bother to put some notable races down, so he's getting quite specific here, like I was in my Cota prediction, and he reckons Marc Marquez will deliver a crushing blow at Aragon and lead the championship comfy, thinking he has already won over the Ducati garage, but then Pecco swings his dang-a-lang during the European summer races to bounce back. So he's predicting a strong summer from Pecco.
It's going to be an FIA summons right there.
Yeah, he is. He hasn't sworn.
No FIA here. Not a problem. Never mind. I said nothing.
That's all good. Yeah, that's quite a bold prediction. I don't think anybody would be surprised with a Marquez crushing victory at Aragon, because what we saw that last year was domination like you've never really seen before. It's Marc Marquez playground Aragon, so we think that's going to happen. Pecco having a massive comeback in the summer. I mean, that's quite believable, actually. I'll give him that. I reckon that is quite believable. And during that summer, we've got some notable races that Jules points out here. Brno's back. Czech Republic. I think Brno is coming back, which is one of my favourite racetracks in the world. I absolutely love it. As a side thing, please iRacing do Brno, because it's my favourite track and I love to sim race on it. And we've got Hungary. The Hungarian Grand Prix as well is going to come back if it actually happens. That's going to be interesting to see these as well. And now George's gone to list some regrets. He reckons KTM are going to regret signing Bastianini and vice versa. Now, I'm not going to argue with that. He was pretty bleak in pre-season testing, and Bastianini just come up and said, "I just don't suit this bike." I think Matt was being a bit defeatist there and a bit realist, and it will eventually click.
Well, I'm taking a bigger picture here. And I think if I'm Kate, at the moment, I understand why Jules says what he says. But understand that if I'm an engineer on that team, I see it as my job to give Bastianini a bike he can ride. And if that's a problem I can solve, then I'm probably making that bike better for all the riders.
But remember, Acosta manages to exploit that weird braking characteristic, and that seems to be his strength on it. So I think they'll probably move the bike further to that direction to suit him, or they'll learn from Honda's mistakes and going down the Honda trap and making the bike unrideable.
Well, yeah, but this is my point. The more suitable your bike is for multiple riders, the better your bike is, because fundamentally it's a balance thing. You're not going to take away Acosta's ability to manipulate that bike through a corner by making it more rideable for Bastianini. But when you make it more rideable for Bastianini, you're increasing the margins for Acosta to play in, right? Yeah. Because the bike has better balance. That means he can be even more extreme and throw it down and tuck it less in the corners, which was his major problem with that. You take away some of those balance problems, you take away some of those issues, some of that chatter, he's only going to be stronger. So I think having to sort somebody out on a machine that they're not comfortable with is actually potentially a great thing for KTM because it keeps them from having that Honda problem. Because Bastianini can ride a bike. That's never been an issue. And his ability, especially like his sense of the ability of managing the tires and preserving them and being fast at the end, well, they could learn a ton from. Imagine Acosta having that ability at the end of the race. If you fix the bike for Bastianini, that's if you solve that equation for Bastianini, you solve it for Acosta too.
Yeah, great point. That is a great point. Talking of great points, Jules goes on and makes another one here. So he reckons Ducati are going to regret going for the conservative choice to keep the 2022 stuff because you've got Grassini and VR46.
24.
Most notably, Alex. Yeah, the GP24. So, but the VR46 bikes are running GP24s as well. So, all that, morbidity. And most notably, Alex Marquez will be nicking notable grid places and therefore points and massively impacting the title fight. So, I think Jules is half suggesting there that there might be a bit of a brotherly family skullduggery going on there. Surely not. Surely the brothers aren't going to help each other, but there is a bit of a risk there. So that's quite a bold thing to claim, but I think it's semi-valid. All the bikes essentially are going to be starting off very similar. As we covered in our testing review show, the GP24 is going to be like the GP24's 0.25 or 0.5 because they do have some bits on it, the factories, but they're going to be incredibly close. Unlike last year, the customer bikes are going to be pretty much full, almost factory spec going into round one. So I think that's quite a valid observation there.
It is. And it's also problematic, and I believe that Ari spoke about it, is you limit your ceiling. Yes, you limit your basement, and that was the issue with the 25 bike, is it wasn't as performant as expected in certain areas that were considered critical. But you limit your upside because the 24 bike has been pretty engineered already. It's been a lot. There's a lot of optimization that has happened on this bike. Whereas Aprilia, KTM, Yamaha, and Honda with the concessions, they're wide open for catching you. And if they do, you don't have that many places left to hide in your engineering department. And I know, and this is the thing, this is where this is a vibes-based podcast. None of us really know what the limit of that 24 bike is, or the 24.25 or the 24.5 or whatever it is. But just looking at it, you've got so much more room to optimize on all the other bikes that you do see that convergence happening at the end of the season, and that could just make it just tasty, right?
Yeah, all good for us. So that's some good points. We're going on the biggest shock. The Marquez move to Ducati is not going to pan out. He's going to injure himself beyond recovery. So Jules and Adam both predicting big injuries for Marc Marquez. We've already covered it already. I think that could be a real thing. Again, I'm not sure if that's a hope or a prediction. I joke, of course, in jest. And he goes on to make the biggest surprise will be De Giannantonio finishing third in the championship, which Danny has also predicted as well. So that's two predictions we have for Fabio De Giannantonio to finish third in the championship, which again I think is a pretty valid shout, actually, to be honest, Matt. Like Matt, who would you? So we've done our prediction. Who would you put in third in the championship? We're presuming it's going to be Mark and Pecco 1 and 2 in whichever order. Who would you put third?
It's honestly, I don't know that I could put someone third right now. I struggle because we don't really know where the bikes are. We don't really know where the riders are.
Oh, and also we must also say that De Giannantonio is on the GP24.25 or whatever it is. He's the third factory bike. The other ones are just pure 24. So if there were some developments thing, De Giannantonio will get them. And also, he may be used as a bit of a guinea pig by Ducati, and he might have the option to take the 25 chassis and the 25 aero just to play it differently. So he could actually end up on the best bike, oddly, until about mid-season, until the factory riders copy him.
Right. Or using him as a mule is exactly what's going to take him out of being third.
No, yeah, it could
They're
hurt
like,
him.
oh,
Also.
here, we're going to put this on your bike. And then suddenly, suddenly halfway through, everything gives up and off I go. You don't know. But if neither of the top two riders wanted the stuff that you're being given, that is a real roll of the dice, I suppose you could say. I don't know. It's interesting. Interesting call to make there.
That is. Did you ever? I think that's sound. I actually think that's right on the money. Yeah, I reckon I'm going to put my eggs into that basket as well. I reckon Di Giannantonio will be third. I can't see any. I just think Alex Marquez will crash a bit too much. Fermin Aldeguer, and Franco Morbidelli. Morbidelli we haven't really considered, but I think that GP 24.27, whatever it is going to help Digia in that fight. But this is the beauty of it. This is wild speculation. We don't have a clue what's really going to happen. This is fantastic. So I reckon that's a good way to end it on a bit of a cliffhanger. Let's wait and see. We are only days away. That's it. We're only days away. So, and I cannot wait. Thank you for joining me for this show, Matt. How wrong will Jules and Adam be? How right will Danny and I be? Only time will tell. As usual, we will be releasing race review shows for every race this season, so we really do hope you'll hop on with us for the ride. Thank you for listening to Mr. Apex MotoGP. Let's go racing.